Well, we're just slogging through Isaiah. we're we're going to soon turn a corner, and we're not going to spend as much time slogging through each section because they all kind of come together as one big vision. When we get to that point, we'll stop and we'll talk about what we want to look for through that time. So hopefully this week we'll wrap up this part of the initial part of the study, and then we'll start to pick up the pace a little bit, and then we'll slam the brakes on once more as we hit some more meat. Chapter 13 and 14, interesting section. It's talking about judging Babylon. Understand this, at the time Isaiah was getting this vision and writing it, Babylon was nothing. It was a small city. The Babylonians weren't that powerful, weren't that important. But within 100 years of this, they are going to rise to be the big bad beast on the block. The Babylonians are going to supplant the Assyrians as the world power. But at this time, they were nothing. This is where people struggle with Isaiah. They really have a hard time understanding that he was seeing beyond the immediate future. And if we can look at it with those eyes that Isaiah can look to the immediate, he can look 100 years down the road, or he can look to eternity, it kind of makes more sense. And we've seen bits and pieces of all of that. We'll continue to see that as we go through this section. But understand that he's talking about something that isn't on anybody's radar screen yet. So as he's saying these words, I'm pretty sure the people are going, Babylon? Are you nuts, Isaiah? Babylon? They're nothing. But they will be. So who would like to read in chapter 13, verses 1 through 5 for me? Take a little chunk here. Susan, go for it.
The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. On a bare hill, raise a signal, cry aloud to them, wave the hand for them to enter the gates of the nobles. I myself have commanded my consecrated ones, have summoned my mighty men to execute my anger, my proudly exulting ones. Hark, a tumult on the mountains as of a great multitude. Hark, an uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathering together. The Lord of hosts is mustering a host for battle. They come from a distant land, from the end of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole earth.
Thanks. It's interesting. He calls them his consecrated ones, his holy ones. He's talking about the Medes, the people who are going to come take care of Babylon. And sometimes we get a little confused when scripture starts calling people that we would say evil as holy or consecrated. All that means is that something that's holy or consecrated is being set apart for God's purpose. The thing in and of itself really has no neutral or no positive or negative connotations. It's neutral. God is going to use it or them for his purpose. That makes it positive. Even though what they're going to do sounds like it's a bad thing, they are still God's instrument. Does that make sense? Because we have to have that kind of firmly in the back of our mind as we go through this section. Who would like to read verse 6?
Can I say something? So when
Sure.
he said, I have given my warriors their orders, who are his order? Who are his warriors?
The Medes, the people who are going to carry out his judgment against Babylon.
Even though
They
they
are God.
oh,
Pardon?
are they good or bad?
It depends. It depends. If you're a Babylonian, they're bad because they're going to come destroy you. They're going to come totally wipe you out. But looking at it from God's perspective, it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. They are going to do his will.
Okay.
And sometimes that's where we struggle because we like to put value judgments on everything. Is it good? Is it bad? And sometimes it just is. And when God is using something or someone for his purpose, does that make it good? Yeah,
And that makes
Marty.
a lot of evil good.
Yeah, a lot of evil is good in that sense. Oh, you're muted, Marty. Can't hear ya. There we go.
I'll read the next one.
Well, we're not quite there yet. But
Okay.
Marilyn.
I may have missed something, but I'm not sure who the Medes are. Do they have another name?
We'll get there.
Oh, okay. Very good.
We'll get there. Okay, Marty, go ahead. Verses 6 through 12 for me, please.
Scream in terror, for the day of the Lord has arrived, the time for the Almighty to destroy. Every arm is paralyzed with fear, every heart melts, and people are terrified. Pangs of anguish grip them, like those of women in labor. They look helpless at one and another, their faces aflame with fear. For see, the day of the Lord is coming, the terrible day of his fury and fierce anger. The land will be made desolate, and all sinners destroyed with it. The heavens will be black above them. The stars will give no light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will provide no light. I, the Lord, will punish the world for its evil and the wickedness for their sin. I will crush the arrogance of the proud and humble the pride of the mighty. I will make people scarcer than gold, more rare than the fine gold of Orph.
Thank you. Kind of echoes what we looked at when we looked at Revelation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This whole idea of the stars in the heavens losing their light, the sun darkened and the moon not giving its light. This is where Isaiah kind of crosses streams. He's talking about the destruction of Babylon, but he's using language that we're going to see also applies to the end times. And he kind of weaves in and out between those because this is really applicable to both. He's seeing this short-term destruction, but he's putting into the context of God's ultimate judgment of sinners. And it's interesting because he's using Babylon to bring judgment on Judah, that southern kingdom. They are his instrument to bring judgment against the southern kingdom. But now he is also going to bring judgment against them using the Medes because they got a little too big for their britches. They started to see themselves as being God, being the ones calling the shots. And then he's looking beyond that to that ultimate day of judgment when sin itself is judged. This is one of those sections, chapter 13 and 14 of Isaiah, causes a lot of confusion. I wish we would preach on it more because it's actually a pretty powerful thing, but people shy away from it because it is a little confusing. Keep in mind that through all of this, as we're weaving back and forth between the now, the immediate future, and the ultimate end, there's one theme that runs through it all. God is in control. God is sovereign. In spite of what the human kings might think, God is ultimately the ultimate authority in the universe. Who would like to read verses 13 through 16 for me? Steve, go for it.
Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place, at the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. Like a hunted gazelle, or like sheep with no one to gather them, all will turn to their own people, and all will flee to their own lands. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered, and their wives ravished. How far did you want?
Let's pause there for a moment. Sounds like a fun time, doesn't it? We're back now looking to the short term. This is the judgment against Babylon that is coming. And it sounds like it's a really nasty thing. People are going to scatter. They're going to be afraid. And the people who are coming to carry out this judgment are ruthless. They have no honor for human life at all. They will kill anything and anyone from the oldest to the youngest because that is what's in their heart. So who would like to read 17 through 22? Yep, Joanne, go for it. Question.
Explain to me again why Babylon got this honor. Why did
The honor?
to be destroyed or to be? Are they little now and they're going to grow into a big city?
Yep.
And that's when this will all happen. This is in the future when he sees
Yep.
Babylon as a bigger city, a
Yep.
bigger.
This is in the future.
Okay.
And so remember, when he's getting this vision and saying all of these things, people are going, what's the deal? Because Babylon is nothing. But he's seeing what's going to happen in the future. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Let's see. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Here's the northern kingdom of Israel. Here's the southern kingdom of Judah over here. They're already divided. The Assyrians are going to be the ones to come in and scatter this northern kingdom, take them off into captivity and drive them away. The Babylonians over here are going to be the ones to come and carry off the southern kingdom. These are the people, the Babylonians, are who God is choosing to use to bring judgment against the southern kingdom, against Judah. Just like he used the Assyrians to bring judgment against Israel, the northern kingdom, he's using the Babylonians to do that same thing to the people in the south, simply because they've turned their back on God and aren't listening. He sent prophet after prophet after prophet to tell the people to turn from their sin and turn back to him. They either ignored the prophets or killed them. And so here God is saying, okay, Isaiah, you're going to be the last in the line to really show them, tell them. The question was, who are the Medes? Persia, Media, over here. These guys grew into the big world power. The Persian Empire was huge. They are going to be the ones who are going to move up and conquer the Babylonians. These are the people that Isaiah is talking about right now. The Babylonians are going to be the target of their conquest. It is going to be these folks over here who are going to be the ones who are going to carry out that judgment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Kind of
it
get
helps
a visual image.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really helped. Thank you.
You're welcome. It sometimes helps to have that visual that we can look at that says, oh, here's here, here's there. That's what.
Definitely helps.
Who would like to read verse 17 through 22 for me, please? Go for it, Vita.
Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not pity children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pride of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or dwelt in for all generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there. But wild beasts will lie down there, and its houses will be full of howling creatures. There ostriches will dwell, and there satyrs will dance. Hyenas will cry in its towers, and jackals in the pleasant palaces. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged.
Thanks. We get a little glimpse here of something that's interesting. Babylon was a gigantic city that was filled with splendor. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon that were created by Nebuchadnezzar were one of the 10 wonders of the ancient world. It was spectacular. There's nothing there now. The city of Babylon is completely gone. They're excavating it. And one of the things I find fascinating is it says, no Arab will pitch his tent there. When you read some of the stories of the people who are excavating the city, they hire a lot of locals as their help, their laborers. None of the locals will stay in the town. They don't want to be anywhere near this place. And what's really fascinating is Vita's version had satyrs. Mine has wild goats in verse 21. The more literal word for that is demons. This is the haunt of demons. And as we saw in Revelation, you're going to have at the end this beast that's going to come and rise to prominence. And this is where it's going to come out of. Whoever that Antichrist figure is at the end is going to come out of there. So we're starting to see the groundwork laid here for something that's going to take place at the end time. But the more important thing is when God says, I'm going to wipe you off the face of the earth, they're wiped off the face of the earth. The city is totally destroyed. It would be like somebody saying they are going to totally destroy Paris, London, New York City. That big, that prominent, that powerful. and no one will ever inhabit that place again. At the time Isaiah was saying these things, again, Babylon wasn't a Paris, it wasn't a London, it wasn't a New York City, it might have been a St. Cloud. But it will soon grow to be the most prominent, powerful city in the world. And it will be totally destroyed.
How many years do you think before or when it happened? When he's saying this, or when Babylon does become this giant?
It was 250 years before it was totally destroyed. Somewhere roughly in there.
The last verse, 21, verse 22, in my version uses the pronoun her time is at hand and her days will not be prolonged. And Vita wrote its time.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Mine says her as well.
I say her too.
Mine too.
Yeah. It is a feminine pronoun in the Hebrew. But I think sometimes we read too much into that.
I have the revised standard, so it's not one of the newer translations. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. Marilyn, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, going back to verse 21, I have the New American Standard, and it talks about the howling things living there. It says shaggy goats will frolic there. Well, that sounds completely innocuous compared to demons or satyrs or anything. Shaggy goats frolicking there. It almost sounds fun.
I would love to see shaggy goats frolicking.
Well, mine says he goats shall gamble.
Yeah.
Oh. Just for my own education, is it Chaldean or Chaldean? I didn't know.
I've always said Chaldean.
Yeah. Okay. After I said the other way, I went, I think that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure a Chaldean or a Chaldean would care, but
I know from doing Old Testament readings, I always have to look up the proper names before I read on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are really interesting.
Okay.
Who would like to read chapter 14, verse 1 through 3 for me, please? Go for it, Joanne.
Okay, I have the New English Bible, so it's a little different. The Lord will show compassion for Jacob and once again make Israel his choice. He will settle them on their own soil, and strangers will come to join them and attach themselves to Jacob. Many nations shall escort Israel to her place, and she shall employ them as slaves and slave girls on the land of the Lord. She shall take her captors captive and rule over her taskmasters. Then the Lord gives you relief from your pain. When the Lord gives you relief from your pain and your fears and from the cruel slavery laid upon you, you will take up this song of derision over the king of Babylon.
Thanks. That's a great prelude into this next section. But we want to pause here for a second, because this is looking both short-term and long-term. Just like previously, we saw the short-term judgment and the long-term final judgment. This is talking about when the Israelites return from captivity in Babylon, how they're going to kind of turn the tables, and they are going to be the power. They're going to employ the Babylonians as their servants, not the other way around. They were slaves when they were in Babylon. And any Babylonians that are left, because when they got carried off into captivity, not everybody went. A lot of the Babylonians stayed behind, took over the properties of Judah, you got this nice big old house or this big sprawling farm. Why let it go to waste? Let's just take it over for ourselves. And we'll keep some of these people around as slaves to work their property, but we'll get the reward for it. Well, now tables are going to be turned. When those Israelites return back home, it's their property again, and it's going to be the Babylonians who are serving them. But he's also looking down the road when Christ returns, and this whole area becomes again the center of the world. And people from all over are going to come there. And this God-forsaken chunk of the universe is going to be where God is going to set up home. And all these nations are going to come and be there. But the immediate is when they return from captivity. And I love how now you're going to take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. So who would like to read verse 4 through 11 for me? Go for it, Marilyn.
Okay. Yeah, verse 4 in my Bible starts like in the middle of a sentence, that you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon and say, how the oppressor has ceased and how fury has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers, which used to strike the people in fury with unceasing strokes, which subdued the nations in anger with unrestrained persecution. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into shouts of joy. Even the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no tree cutter comes up against us. Sheol from beneath is excited over you to meet you when you come. It arouses for you the spirits of the dead, all the leaders of the earth. It raises all the kings of the nations from their thrones. They will all respond and say to you, even you have been made weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp and the music of your harps have been brought down to Sheol. Maggots are spread out as your bed beneath you, and worms are your covering.
Wow.
Isn't that a wonderful image of the king of Babylon?
Do we know how the Babylons are defeated? How do the Israelites raise an army, or is that the army he was talking about before?
This is let me go back to this again. Oh, let me.
The Persians.
The Medes defeat the Babylonians,
Yeah,
right?
Medes.
Yep. Here we go. The Medes, the Persians, this Media-Persian Empire is going to be the ones to come in and conquer Babylon. It's not going to be the Israelites. It's going to be the Persians who are going to be the ones who are going to be God's instrument in taking down Babylon. I love that image of the grave below is all astir to meet you at your coming. All of these other rulers of the world who are in this nebulous afterworld place are going to greet the king of Babylon and say, hey, look, you're just like us now. We're nothing. That's really what God is saying to everybody here. The kings of this earth at the end are nothing. You have maggots and worms for your bed. That's a very harsh image for a king who is going to set himself up like he is the second coming of God. That's how powerful the king of Babylon was. That's what he thought of himself, is that he thought he was God, literally God here on earth. Joanne, did you have a question or?
No.
Oh, okay. All of the pomp and circumstance that surrounded the king of Babylon is nothing to God. He could care less what people think about themselves. And this is going to be the downfall of the king of Babylon. It's his pride, his arrogance. That's why God is choosing to judge him. He was the instrument that God chose to carry out judgment against the southern kingdom. But because of that, he got a little haughty, a little proud, and the Babylonians just saw themselves as they like to say, all this in a bag of chips. They thought they were the greatest thing since sliced bread. And Tiglath-Pileser, the last king, thought he was greater than anything. This next section, we'll do 12 through 15. This is a really interesting section because this section, while it's immediately applied to the king of Babylon, people are also able to look at this and say, this also applies to Satan. And we'll look at that in just a second. But who'd like to read 12 through 15 for me? Catherine, go for it.
How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High, but you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit.
Thanks. There's some parallels there.
Mm-hmm.
In Luke chapter 10, Jesus said, I saw Satan fall like a star from heaven. This whole in verse 12 here, where the king is called the morning star, Lucifer, that's the word for that, Lucifer. Where do we see that name, Lucifer, in our faith? It's a name that we have for Satan, the morning star. And that was Satan's downfall. He was a created being, the one created literally to lead the worship in heaven, who thought he was unequal to God, thought he could be God, and got the boot because of that. And here we see that same thing is happening to the king of Babylon. He thought he was going to rise to the highest heights. This is kind of that parallel of Satan wanting to be God. It's Tiglath-Pileser wanting to be God. Is God going to let somebody take his place? I hope not. I really hope not. And so he goes from the highest of highs to the depths of the grave. There are so many tangents to that concept of going from the highest of highs to the depths of the grave. Think of that in terms of our own lives. Sometimes we get a little too big for ourselves, too smart for our own good. And we're on that height, that mountain. And God has this way of chopping our feet out from under us and bringing us down to the lows. We go from the highest of highs of life here, filled with the Spirit, knowing where we belong in our hearts, to the depths of the grave with our bodies. Our spirit lives with Him. Life is this roller coaster. And all depends on what our perspective is of how it affects us. If we're going through on a strictly human basis, those times where we go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows are really hard. Joanne shared earlier this before we started about seeing somebody who's in that lowest of low place. It's tough to watch from the outside looking in. Again, we have to keep in mind that it's God who is in control. And while things look really, really hard sometimes from the outside, sometimes we have to set back and remind ourselves that all we're seeing is the veneer. All we're seeing is what it looks like from our perspective. The behind the scenes stuff where God is deep at work is what truly matters. And it's the same here. You have the veneer of being the most powerful creature in the world, the ruler of the universe in your human terms. You are the king who raises yourself up. But that's just how the world sees you. That's how you see yourself. But how God sees it is a totally different thing. That's why it's so really vitally important that we as God's children don't get trapped or caught in that trap of just putting on the smiley, happy veneer. You know, we allow our struggles to shine through because it's in those struggles that God shines brighter. You know, can't tell you how many times I would go visit somebody and I knew their world was falling apart. And when I'd ask them how they're doing, they say, "Oh, I'm fine, Pastor. Everything's good." You know, put on these smiley, happy face and, change the subject, ask about me or whatever it was. But they couldn't allow themselves to be seen for what was truly happening. I'll let you in on a little secret. When we do that, God has a tendency to just step back and say, "Okay, I can wait. I'll wait till you come to me honestly. I'll wait till you can be honest with people who are here for you. Then I'll move." It's the same here with the king of Babylon, where he becomes totally honest with who he is, and other people see him for who he is, isn't on this side of the earth. It's when he's in the grave, laying on that nice little bed of worms and maggots. That's when he finally is seen for who he is. But God all along knows that's who he is. So when we want to put on the happy face and pretend everything's wonderful, who are we fooling? I think we're only fooling ourselves and maybe trying to convince other people. But the funny thing about that is other people know what's going on in our lives, and we're trying to convince them it's okay. That's why, Joanne, my heart ached for you, but it also rejoices that you can admit this is hard. It's hard to watch people we love and care about become a shell of themselves. To be able to admit that is very courageous. But it also means that God is there, knitting your heart together, holding it together. So thank you for your willingness to share that. Because this life ain't easy, folks. It is not. And sometimes we think we're the king of Babylon. We think we're all that. So who would like to read?
Someone
Pardon?
someone just said to me recently that the good part of old age is it doesn't last long.
There's some truth in that.
Sometimes it lasts longer than you want, but yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it lasts way too. Sometimes it shows up a lot earlier than we want. Who would like to read verse 16 through 23 for me, please? Marty, go for it.
Everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdom of the world tremble? Is this the one who destroyed the world and made it into a wasteland? Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? Is the kings of nations lie in stately glory, each in his own tomb? But you will be thrown out of your grave like a worthless branch, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will be dumped into a mass grave with those killed in battle. You will descend to a pit. You will not be given a proper burial, for you will have destroyed your nation and slaughtered your people. The descendants of such an evil person will never again receive honor. Kill the man's children, let them die because their father sins. They must not rise and conquer the earth, filling the world with their cities. Should I go to the end there?
Yes, please.
This is the Lord of heaven's armies. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies says. I myself have risen against Babylon. I will destroy its children and children's children, says the Lord. I will make Babylon a desolate place of owls filled with swamps and marshes. I will sweep the land with a broom of destruction. I, the Lord of heaven's armies, have spoken.
Thanks. Thanks. This is a fitting judgment. The king of Babylon, who thinks he is the greatest thing in the world, is basically when he's dead, is going to be thrown into a mass grave with other soldiers who are killed. That is a huge, huge disgrace. Think of the pyramids in Egypt and how grand they are. They're basically tombs of Egyptian pharaohs.
Yeah.
A leader in those days had elaborate tombs built for themselves. It was that last show of honor and respect, and that generations after generation were going to pay homage to that person because they were powerful. This guy's going to be a nothing. He's going to be wiped off the face of the earth. The part that I find fascinating, it's also the offspring, his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will also be wiped out because of his sin. God doesn't just judge the person. It will be generations that are affected by what that person does. And that's a scary thought when you think about it. But we see that play out, this whole idea of generational sin. It plays out time and time. And you see it in Scripture. We go through the book of Genesis, we're going to see how this whole idea of lying and deception run through Abraham all the way down his lineage. But it's even the same in our world today. I think everybody can agree that spousal abuse is not a good thing, right? We all in agreement with that? I would go so far as to call that a sin. But yet, how often do the children who grow up in that environment do the same thing? And their children do the same thing. And somewhere along the line, somebody has to step in and break that cycle. We have dependency and alcoholism, same thing. Grandpa stopped off at the bar and had a drink with the boys on the way home. Well, Dad would, come home from work on Friday with a six-pack and sit around drinking all weekend. And the son would, basically be a drug addict, and their kids, who knows? It's that generation to generation to generation. And quite often what we see is that when it goes from one generation to the next, it gets worse. The more times it gets passed down, it magnifies. Till finally God comes in and says, this is it, we're done. That's what's happening here. He's looking at this and saying, I don't want those children to have an impact on the world like their grandfather did. We're just going to nip it in the bud right here. And not only are we going to destroy grandpa, but we're going to take care of the son and the grandson and the grandson, great grandson. The things that we do have a lasting impact. Could be for good, could be for bad, could be for evil. I think if everybody really understood that, we might make different choices in life, really. If we really understood the impact of our actions on those who follow behind us, we might not be so quick to make it all about me, which is really what Tiglath-Pileser's ultimate downfall was. He made it all about him. He made it all about him. And in the end, God says enough is enough. And what I find absolutely fascinating again is he's saying all of this 100 years before it happens, 250 years before it happens. We're going to stop here because, well, A, we're out of time, and B, we're at just a natural break. And when we come back after Christmas, we're going to go through this series of prophecies against these other surrounding nations. All of these nations had interaction with the Israelites. All of them are going to be judged for what they did with those interactions. In other words, what God is saying is that maybe at the time, I'll let things slide, but sooner or later, I am going to rise up and redeem my people. And there is a world that is going to be held in judgment. And I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole today because, well, we're living in a time where that's kind of coming to fruition. And maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll have a little clearer insight about what's going on in the Middle East. I doubt it. But we'll just have to kind of keep that in the back of our mind, is that ultimately, again, God is in charge. For good, for bad, for indifferent. God is ultimately in charge. Any questions? Yeah, Vita.
I have a comment. I'll make it super quick because I know we're at time. We watch a lot of Henry Louis Gates' show on PBS, Finding Your Roots. And he has a theory, I think more than a theory, that generations of trauma, because he started out helping African Americans trace their ancestry as well as they could back to, when they came from Africa, if possible. And some he's able to find and some he can't. But he's really explored what generations of trauma do to your DNA. And that had never occurred to me before. And I find that really, really interesting. I can apply that to other cultures as well. There's just not enough time here, but so it's kind of the same, I think, sort of the same concept as what you just
it gives us
about.
that biological understanding of how, we know the what, and sometimes it's good to know the how. Why is this so impactful? What is going on?
Well, it helped me because I'll just have to remember that I can't change it. I'm not in charge. Sharon isn't in charge. God's in charge. Whatever's happening for her, God's in charge again. And I just have to accept that. And
we don't have to like it, but we have,
not at all.
We accept. We accept, and sometimes we go kicking and screaming in that acceptance. And at the end of the day, just realize that this is just a blip in time.
Right.
But sometimes those blips seem to take forever. Well, thank you, everybody. Just like my goodbye took forever today. Have a great couple of weeks. I'll see you in church, and I'll see you whenever, and I'll put the plug in right now. If you're not doing anything Christmas Day in the morning, come to church. I get to preach.
Oh, you do?
Take care.
Oh.
Looking forward to it.
I'll be there Christmas Day.
All righty.
Are you playing
Alrighty.
drums this year?
No.
No. Okay.
Ooh, maybe that's maybe instead of a sermon, I'll do a drum solo.
There you go.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Basil.